Hi, this is Bruce Fealk, and our show is Michigan Progress, and we have with us today State Senator Gilda Jocobs. And I'm going to let Senator Jacobs introduce herself and tell us which committee she's on and what part of the state she represents.
Great. Hi, Bruce. It's great to be here. I live in Huntington Woods, and I represent a district that is in South Oakland County. My district runs from Hazel Park to Farmington Hills and all those cities in between. My committees are economic development, finance, elections and election reform, and health policy.
Okay, well, today we're going to pretty much focus on election reform because that's a real focus of mine. So what election issues do you feel are the most urgent for Michigan, the Michigan legislature to address first off? I know there's been some talk about same-day voter registration. In fact, I have an article here just recently, one of our, I guess that was going pretty well until now we've hit a bump in the road recently. So why don't you tell voters, what our viewers, what that is and why it would make a difference to us?
Well, really, there are really a lot of election issues. First of all, I'm working on a bipartisan, bicameral package of bills right now to address some of the concerns that were brought up from, as you recall, there were petition signatures that were collected recently with the whole affirmative action proposal. And a lot of people felt that the paid signature gatherers weren't always truthful with people that were...
So telling them something something about the proposal that wasn't true.
So we're trying to kind of work out some better rules and regulations in terms of kind of regulating the people that are actually getting signatures collected and making sure that people really know what they're signing before they kind of sign on the dotted line. And it's great. It's really been nice to kind of work together. Michelle McManus is the chair of this committee, and I think we're going to end up getting a nice little package of 4 bills that will really make some changes. But there are a lot of other campaign issues that really need to be addressed here in Michigan. We need to be making it much easier for people to vote and to participate in the whole process. Right now, you can basically lie and say that you're going to be away from the poll and get an absentee ballot and vote absentee. Well, there really should be no reason absentee voting. Anybody should be able to vote for any reason and use an AV ballot and also an absentee ballot. There's also, and I meet with clerks all the time, actually, and a lot of them have come on board with a lot of these ideas and actually suggested some of these ideas. But a lot of us would like to see the time extended, let's say a week before Election Day, that would allow people to actually come in to the clerk's office and vote right there. As you know, we have these voting machines right now that you just kind of run the information through, and if a ballot is mismarked, for example, in a primary, sometimes people they don't realize that they're only supposed to vote one party. And we saw this a lot in Farmington Hills, where Aldo and I were running.
Aldo Vagnosi and I running in Farmington Hills, and somebody goes in and they want to really vote in the Republican primary, but they see Aldo's name or my name for the state rep or senate, and then on these absentee ballots, they go over to the other party and will mark off our names. Well, what happens is that ballot is spoiled, and none of the other votes that they've made count because they're spoiled and basically they're not used. But if there was a way for somebody to put their ballot through the machine, have it read, and if there was a problem, have it come out and allow them to fix that, then you're really and that's happening in a lot of other states right now.
Oh yeah.
So we're not leading the way on this.
Right. No. That's happened in other states, and actually I think it's.
I know Florida did it last time.
Oregon or Washington, where they've all internet voting, where you can just go on the internet.
That makes me a little nervous.
Well, but I'm just saying, that people are really trying to
be sure that the process is opened up and trying to encourage more people to participate. And I think that's really what the goal should be. So early voting is an idea, no reason absentee voting, and then even, although this really does tear the hair out of the clerks, same-day registration, which is something that a lot of people feel can work. It works other places. And with technology the way it is, we really should be able to have the technology to see that happen.
One of the issues that I've been really concerned about is the accuracy of our voting machines. I know we're told all the time there's no problems here, but would you be in favor of legislation that would require random, mandatory hand counts on election night, even if it wouldn't affect the outcome of the election, so that voters really feel like we're getting a fair shot and making sure our elections are 100%, well, not 100%, but extremely accurate, so they're comfortable that our voting systems are fair and accurate to everybody concerned. So we make sure the right person actually gets put into office.
I mean, I think I would definitely look into that. I think that there's merit to that. We want to be sure that the election process has integrity. So I guess it would make sense to be sure that we're kind of always testing and making sure that the clerks are doing the best job and that all the votes are getting counted.
Voting technology is a big issue right now.
It is.
I know there was a bill in the Congress that kind of got backed down by the Democrats. There were a lot of people that, the two sides are very interesting. One is, well, it's better than nothing, and it's certainly a big improvement, and it takes care of a lot of the issues. And then there were, the other side where it's not even close. We can only, the people that feel like we should only have hand-counted paper ballots. And there was actually a poll, I know you've probably seen it, a Zogby poll that shows now that 92% of Americans would want to see their vote counted in front of them on paper rather than these voting machines.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm more concerned that there's a paper trail. I think that you don't want to totally depend on technology. So we want to be able to go back and have that paper trail. And because that's what I think is going to show whether there's integrity in the process.
The only problem with that is that, and I know maybe I'm not a real technologist, but what could happen is that even if you get the piece of paper that shows, yeah, this is who I voted for, that doesn't guarantee that the tabulator is actually counting the vote the same way. And there would, even if you go back, so there's a disconnect between the paper what's printed on the paper and what goes into the central tabulator. So if there aren't audits done to guarantee that everything matches up, that you could have, in fact, there was just a study, Deborah Bowen, the Secretary of State in California, did a test of all the machines. You might have read about this. And every single machine, including they use Diebold scanners, which is what we use here in Michigan, found that they could be hacked. So that's a big concern of mine.
That's scary. That's very scary. Probably an audit is a good idea.
A hand-counted, mandatory random audit I think would solve a lot of that. And I know I gave you a DVD a long time ago.
Yeah, you did. It was fascinating. It was showing how easy it was to hack into these programs.
And just for our viewers, what that was about is Harry Hursty. He's I think he's from Norway. Did a study in Florida with the secretary, one of the clerks down there, and they actually did a test vote, and they put the ballots through the machine, and the ballot was 6-2 one way, and when they came out on the tabulator, it was 7-1 the other way. And what he had done is actually put a program onto the memory card that the scanner uses, which are the same scanners. The reason it's relevant in Michigan is those are the same scanners that are used here in Michigan. So I know I'm a little bit concerned about the technology.
It was a scary DVD to watch.
and there's more. So there's a lot of issues around voting technology. Another issue that I wasn't aware of until relatively recently is that candidates of the party of the Secretary of State are placed on the top of the ballot. So if it was a Republican Secretary of State, the Republican gubernatorial candidate, let's say, would be on the top of the ballot. Would you be in favor, and that was actually happened under a Democratic administration, under Richard Austin's administration, would you be in favor of legislation to address that disparity where we would randomly have the different parties and different precincts on top of the ballot?
I think that would make sense, and I really wasn't aware of that either until it was brought to my attention.
I'm sure most of our viewers don't know that
Right,
either.
and on a close race,
2% is a lot.
2% is a huge amount.
So I think that we do have to address that.
Have you talked with the Secretary of State about any of these issues?
Not with this issue. Now, we are putting together kind of a package of bills right now that we, some that we're going to be able to agree with Republicans and some that may be our own sort of Democratic bills. And this clearly is one that we can put into the hopper.
Yeah. All these seem relatively, like they should be bipartisan bills,
right?
Or
especially
bills.
like this really is a nonpartisan issue, because depending on who's in power,
right.
they're going to.
And the Secretary of State is often from a different party than the governor, and so that would seem like a thing to make sense. Another issue that's come up in a group that I'm involved in, Michigan Election Reform Alliance, is that there have been some issues with elections in Michigan recently, and some specific cases that I'm aware of. And it seems like there's not very good enforcement of the election laws that are already on the books. And I know one of the cases, they've been to the Secretary of State, and Chris Terry, I think is his name. Chris Thomas. The Secretary of State's office was very hostile to trying to address these issues. Would you, I don't know how you address the fact that we already have laws on the books that are not being enforced. And I think there's only one state police officer that's assigned to election issues.
Right. Honestly, Bruce, we clearly have a huge budget problem in Michigan.
Sure.
And we've got to decide where we're going to spend our dollars. I'm not sure that for, the people who are trying to, make some of these tough decisions, that this is going to be as high of a priority as, you and I might want it to be, when there's so many other really, really pressing issues in the state. What I would like to see is that we better train the people that are running elections at the local level. They have a real hard time finding people sometimes to.
I know, I work the polls.
Right, to work at the offices, to do the tabulation, to work at the polls. And things have become a little bit more complex. Oftentimes, the people that are working as poll workers have been doing this for decades. They may not be as savvy with some of the newer changes that are being made in terms of the voter files and some of the computer work that's out there. So I think we need to do a better job making sure that the people at the local level get the training they need. And I think we would eliminate some of the problems that we're seeing.
I know when I trained to be a poll worker this last election, I went to the City Hall in Rochester Hills, and there were a lot of young people they used. I was surprised.
Yeah, which is great, and we're really trying to encourage more young people to get involved too.
And the training was, to say the least, in my opinion, inadequate, especially when you're dealing with the electronic part of the machines.
Right.
And people don't realize too, when you work the polls, that at the end of the night, there's a big, long procedure that goes through to make sure that the votes are right on, although there could still be issues like we talked about before.
Yeah.
So you think that better training would be the way to go? Would you be in favor of maybe one more police officer to enforce
Honestly,
election
one
law?
more police officer
is not going to make
is not going to make a difference. We hope that the clerks that are out there are doing the best job that they can. They've been trained. They need to train their workers better. We've got clerks who are operating with less and less money right now at the local level.
I was at a hearing that you had in Troy, and one of the things that came up was about these elections in November. I don't know what there was a term they were referred to, where they were having elections, separate elections for school boards, I think it was.
Right.
So that seemed like a big cost issue.
Yeah, it's a big issue. It's a big cost issue. What we did in the legislature is we gave the school districts the option of either having a May or November election, because we're trying to consolidate some of the elections. So some of the school districts opted for May,
which cost some of the districts more money. Others said, no, we'll just be part of the whole November election. And there's really, there's pluses and minuses with both ways. Some people feel that if school elections are on the November ballot and you have a very, very long ballot, then some of those issues or some of those elections don't get the full attention that they need. Other people feel, well, we really, need to do this to save money. Now, there's even been some, idea of maybe eliminating school elections and perhaps even doing that over the internet if there was a way to maybe do that. So I think there may be some creative, innovative ways down the road to address some of those issues.
Well, personally, I hope you stay away from some of those innovations.
No, I understand some. Yeah, I mean, I understand. Some of the concerns that you have because they're.
I'm a very technologically adept person, compared to most people my age, especially. And I used to be a big proponent of, God, I hate going and waiting in line for half an hour, whatever it might be. And, God, isn't there a way we could do this over the internet?
Yeah.
And then all these issues that came up with the 2000 election, the 2004 election came up, and then I thought, you know what? Technology and voting don't seem to mix really.
I mean, honestly, that's why I would like to see no reason absentee voting and allow people to vote early, and if they're worried about standing in lines, just be able to go and get your ballot and be able to study it at home and send it in.
Now, would you say there's common goals between both parties? I mean, I know my thing is I don't mind losing as long as I feel like I lost fairly.
Fairly.
and that's my real feeling about it. Do you think like do you feel like the Democrats and Republicans are on the same page on voter fairness and accuracy?
Sometimes I'm not sure we're on the same page. For a while, I thought a lot of Republicans thought that the no reason absentee voting was a good idea, and some of those folks. I think getting some pressure from from people to back off on that in the Republican Party. This is something that the Democrats feel is very important. Like I said, we want to open up the process, and I think that's an issue that we are definitely separated by. In fact, Saul Eunesis was at a forum that I was at recently. It was a hearing similar to the one that you were at in Troy. This was another part of the state. And, he said, no, we can't do that because it's going to create, voter fraud. The photo ID issue is an issue that Democrats and Republicans have very different views on.
Seems like we could get together on voting.
But in terms of this petition gathering situation, that's something that we are agreeing on and working together. And the clerks, they are, many of them are nonpartisan, and they've got some issues that they are able to work with, both sides on because it makes sense, and we want to be able to help them do their job better. But there's other issues like the Rogers Law that was passed that changed how, that basically said that you have to vote at the address that is on your driver's license. And I don't know if you remember several years ago when Mike Rogers was running for Congress in the East Lansing and Lansing area, and MSU students were in that, in his district. Those students tended to vote more Democratic, and this law was passed just in time before that election went through. Well, they were very confused. They thought that they could vote there. They couldn't. Then you also, the first time you vote, you have to do it in person. And a lot of students felt very disenfranchised by this law. And interestingly enough, Rogers won by like 100 votes. Mm-hmm. So changing that law really, I think, helped him win that seat. And yet, all these students then felt very disenfranchised.
Another issue that I'm just curious about, I don't know if you'll know anything about this. I know last year or the year before, Secretary of State sent out these postcards. And there's been a lot of talk lately about vote caging in connection with the attorney.
Vote
caging?
What's the vote caging?
Vote caging is where they would, well, this was done, and this has been part of the investigation with Alberto Gonzalez and the attorney firings at the national level. But what they do is they would send a letter to an address of a soldier, a lot of times into a minority district, and it would come back, addressee unknown, and then the Republicans would challenge that voter. And the thing that upset me the most is they were sending these letters to a lot of soldiers that were serving in Iraq, that they knew were serving in Iraq, and then they would challenge their votes when the votes came in. And I'm wondering, it sounds like you're not really too familiar with this
No,
issue.
I'm not familiar with it at all.
Did you get a postcard? There were postcards that were sent, and they were, I think it was one of these things where they would be sent back if the addressee wasn't at the home. And I'm just curious, and I know it doesn't sound like you're going to have an answer for me, but maybe I'll discuss it. I might have Terry Land on my show sometime. But that's a big concern of mine anyway, but we'll talk about something else since that's not something you're too familiar with. Another issue was that I got a call. In fact, I got it from the ACLU today about the Real ID program. Yeah. And the first thing is that seems, and just for our viewers, that's where we're going to have to get it's going to be basically a national ID card. And we're going to have to show photo ID in Michigan. There was just a Supreme Court ruling recently that said that the photo ID was going to be enforced and had been kind of in limbo for a couple of years, I think. So tell our viewers a little bit about what photo ID and Real ID means, and the fact that, I guess it's an unfunded mandate from the federal government.
Yeah, I mean, they're talking about millions and millions of dollars to get that off the ground in terms of
I've heard
the
even
real
billions in some states.
Yeah, and in Michigan, well, there's two things. There's sort of the Real ID and then the whole issue of photo ID in order to vote. They're really two kind of separate issues. But the concern about the Real ID Act, which would have everybody having this sort of uniform card that they would have, is that the issue of identity theft. That there's so much information that's out there about a person, and that they were planning on outsourcing this to a company
like ChoicePoint, I heard, which is one of the companies that was already broken into once.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be the government that would have this; it would be another private entity that would have this. Just really, as somebody who's very, very concerned about protecting people's ID, this just really raises so many issues for me personally, and as well as the unfunded mandate. We don't have enough money in Michigan to take care of the services that we need to provide, and unless the federal government is going to provide the money to do this, we just can't afford. We can't afford to do this. But the whole issue of photo ID in terms of voting is something that it sounds like this makes sense. Of course, you should be sure that you're the right person when you're coming to the to the polling place. I mean, it sounds right, but in practice, it really will discriminate against minorities and certain ethnic groups. And as I said before, our desire is to really open up the voting process. Let me tell you a story about a woman that I know. Her name is Ethel. She's an African-American woman who came from the Deep South. And a few years ago, I realized that Ethel was able to collect Social Security. So I said, Ethel, I think you need to go down to the Social Security office and find out what's available to you. So she did. And the way Social Security works is they want you to have a bank account so that they can electronically transfer your funds into your bank. Well, Ethel never had a bank account. So she went to the bank, and you can't open up a bank account without photo ID. Well, Ethel never drove and never had a regular state ID card because she really never had a need for it. And because since she never had a bank account, never needed to use a photo ID to even have a check cashed. So we tried to find out the information that the Secretary of State would need to get the state ID. Well, they need a birth certificate, or a marriage certificate, or a high school diploma, or even your picture from your high school yearbook. Well, Ethel didn't graduate from
high school. She was never married. She didn't drive. We couldn't figure out who she, we couldn't prove who she was, but she's been paying taxes for years, paying her bills for years. So because I knew her for 28 years, I was able to write a letter, an affidavit, saying this is who Ethel is, so that she could then go to the Secretary of State's office and get her photo ID. Well, this is great for somebody because she knew a state senator, but most people in that situation don't know a state senator to go to bat for them. And somebody like Ethel would be totally disenfranchised if they required a
we're going to do a
photo
whole show.
ID.
I talked to the ACLU today. We were going to do a whole show on Real ID because I think
that
that's
would
a
be
big
great.
issue.
Yeah, I mean,
And
Shelley Weisberg.
I think I'm going to have Shelley come on my show. But one thing that I learned from the ACLU today that I didn't know either is that if you can't afford this ID, it's going to be pretty expensive, from what I understand. And so someone that maybe is on a limited income won't be able to get one. And there's going to be a two-tier system. You can get a less expensive version, but it won't allow you to fly. It won't allow you to go into government buildings, for instance. You're going to have a Real ID to enter a government building. So it's a very onerous law that they've passed. And I hope on a state level we'll still have some say.
Well, what's interesting...
We're going to have to wrap up here in a second.
Oh, my God.
I know it's gone by
half
fast.
hour has gone by so quickly.
We have a little bit of time, but go ahead and
No,
say
I was
what
just going to say that I have a resolution on Real ID. I believe Senator Papa George has one. I think even Cameron Brown has one, who's also a Republican. This has raised concerns of Democrats and Republicans in terms of what are we doing, what's the cost, and a lot of the privacy and infringement, personal infringement issues. So I think a lot of people care a lot about this issue.
Well, it's a big issue, and especially in these tight budget times, for the federal government to put an unfunded mandate on the state, especially one that has so many privacy concerns and like the privatization of the database into a company that has already been hacked once, where millions and millions of names have been stolen. So that's a big issue we're going to be talking about with the ACLU, and we'll have another whole show on that. But I want to appreciate
thank you,
for coming
Bruce.
on the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
I know it goes by fast, and we'll maybe have a chance to do it again soon.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is Michigan Progress. Please check out our blog at www.michiganprogress.blogspot.com, and this show will be archived on there as soon as we have it up on Waterford Station. We'll get it up on the line, and if you want to watch it later, you'll be able to have a chance to do that. Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Bruce Fealk. I'm the host of Michigan Progress, and today we have Hi, my name is Bruce Fealk. I'm the host of Michigan Progress, and today we have State Representative John Garfield. John, why don't you tell our viewers where you represent, first of all?
Well, first of all, I represent the 45th District, which is Rochester Hills, and Oakland Township.
Okay, and John and I talked a little bit on the phone a couple weeks ago, and he has a couple issues he wanted to talk about, then I have some I want to talk about. And the first one he wanted to talk about, that I'm going to let him kind of hold sway here for a minute or two, is the fact that he wants to have an independent audit of Blue Cross. I understand that bill has been introduced by you several times, but it hasn't gone all the way up and gotten to the floor of the House for a vote. So why don't you tell us, first of all, why a good thing, and why do you think it hasn't gotten the hearing on the floor of the House so far?
Well, Bruce, first of all, under the state law, only the insurance commissioner, Mary Waters, or the legislature has the right to audit Blue Cross. It was created by Public Act 350 of 1980, which only the state, through the commissioner or the legislature, having that ability to audit them independent of their own auditing procedures. And Mr. Panetta, several years ago from Illinois, who was the national president of Blue Cross, in a statement that he made in the Wall Street Journal of Chicago, said that it was our right and responsibility to make sure that their accounting was in fact true and honest. And I read that in the paper and I put forth the bill.
And what do you think, we talked a little bit about that issue, and what do you think we might find if we were able to do an independent audit of Blue Cross?
Well, there's been many times that people have contacted me that they had a billing on their private bill that was not them, or they had not been to that doctor, and how it got on their billing they didn't know. Finally, when I put the bill forth the first time, Frank Fitzgerald, who was then the current insurance commissioner, or not the current one, but just retired, had come to my office and he said, "John, you're absolutely correct. The problem is Blue Cross's computer system was about $500 million antiquated, where they just could not keep up with the claims. And that's part of the problem, is the efficiency."
Why does it take a bill? I'm kind of not that up on, bill. Why would it take a bill? Why couldn't it just be done, as part of normal oversight of the state over its insurance companies?
Well, Bruce, I wouldn't be here if that was true. I wouldn't have to be doing this or trying to keep proceeding with this. My honest was to get our hands, if you will, in government around healthcare cost containment. And that's very important to me. I'm not in the healthcare business, but I was on my way to work one day, and there was an economist on WWJ or WJR that happened to say that Chrysler, GM, Ford, Chrysler, as we know them, Delphi, Visteon, they will not, look like they look today in just 10 years. And then they went on and they spoke about, he went on and he spoke about how municipal governments, how they provide services. They would not be able to pave a mile of road in 10 years, or our school systems would be broke. And it was really astonishing to me to have an economist say that, and within 10 months, here was the situation with GM, Ford, and Chrysler, Delphi, and Visteon on healthcare costs and what it was costing them. So I thought it was in our best interest. I don't want to see anybody in the unemployment line, and those costs are staggering, and they go up every year, and some of them just unjustifiably. When you have the small business person that can't keep up, and then he has to start withdrawing. In fact, we penalize our employers. When they supply health care, we tax it. It should be, if it's a benefit, we should not tax that, to let that employer offer better benefits to their employees.
Well, we'll get to that subject a little bit more, because I just saw the movie Sicko, and with Michael Moore's movie that just came out, and John and I had talked before on the phone, and I had asked John to see the movie, but he hasn't seen it yet, so I'm going to take a Republican to see Sicko, and hopefully we'll have maybe a chance to talk about it again. The other issue you wanted to talk about tonight was privatization of Medicaid.
Yes.
Now, I'm not a privatization person, so because I haven't seen too many examples where privatization has worked out. It seems like it hasn't worked out in Iraq, where we have private contractors. It hasn't worked out mostly with the charter schools. So why do you think that privatization of Medicaid would work out to the benefit of both the consumer and the provider of the services?
Okay, well, let me explain. When I ran the bill for the audit of Blue Cross, let me just tell you, I've had people say that, why are you jumping on Blue Cross? They just happen to be basically the state provider that we created by government. They take and anticipated about 80% of the insured in Michigan is through Blue Cross. Yes, I know they're insurer of the last resort. I wish all insurance companies took that into consideration, as opposed to what your previous background was healthcare wise. I don't think that's fair I think that's unbalanced in the healthcare industry. I would like to see all insurers be able to take on whatever plans that they wish to purchase their insurance. Unfortunately, as you and I discussed, we have cherry picking in the system, which is wrong. But the idea was not to go after Blue Cross. It's that 80% of the insured in Michigan, whether they're teachers, UAW members, lay people, office people, most of them are insured by Blue Cross. And we haven't audited them ever that I can remember. And I'm hearing stories from doctors and others that just in administrative costs alone, and I believe you and I discussed this, 23 to 30% is what I'm hearing in administrative costs. That is unacceptable.
For Blue Cross and
for
private
Blue Cross,
insurers.
that's correct. On the Medicaid side, when I ran the Medicaid, state Medicaid privatization bill, that also has kind of partnered with this other bill and failed too, to get through not only Republican-dominated legislature, but now the Democrat-dominated legislature. And it's kind of upsetting to me that we should be together working to create a healthcare system that works and is affordable to all of Michigan citizens. And in the Medicaid bill, when we sent it to Lansing Service Bureau, which is a independent part of the state that looks into the bills to make sure that they're legal and all the other what the other states do. So when that come back to me and it said about $800 million could be in fraud alone.
Well, now this is on the audit.
On the audit of
okay.
From
but what about on the? You talked to me about also privatizing Medicaid.
Yes. Now let me
Okay.
talk about that. I had to get there first.
Okay.
Okay. In the privatization part of Medicaid, now what government does well, I'm for what we do well. One of the things we cannot privatize naturally would be the social workers that go out into the community, meet with the families, does really the legwork and groundwork because they represent the public. But their administrative costs, like you and I discussed, the administrative costs, personnel, finance, payroll, these kinds of things that we could outsource. And let me just tell you why. In the bureaucracy, if you will, if something goes wrong and the Auditor General asks them, and I've just talked to Auditor McTavish last week, when he goes to a department and finds discrepancies and tells them how to take corrective action, they know that they will probably not see him for almost 4 years because just the lack of staff to get back to that department. He can come back 4 years later, tell them what corrective action to take, but there's no punishment, so they continue to do what they've done in the past. And that is a failure, and that is unacceptable.
Well, you mentioned a word there that's a kind of a bad word in today's vernacular, which is outsourcing. And so the question in my mind, as you mentioned that, is because everything's being outsourced. Engineering work is being outsourced to other countries. Because I have a neighbor, I was talking to her, and we were talking about engineering. She was in favor of some of the outsourcing that's happening because you can get, as a consumer, we get our products cheaper, like Walmart. But when you mention outsourcing, are you talking about just putting into the hands of a private Michigan company, or are you talking about possibly letting a company that we don't know where their workers are, because that's outsourcing work, the administrative work could end up in India?
Well, I agree with you, but I would rather be in Michigan hands. We should take care of our own first. And if we have the companies that can provide, and I'm sure we do have the ability in Michigan for those providers to step forward or bid on those contracts. Now, let me explain to you. When you have bureaucrats in the system and they're part of that system, if there's mistakes being made and there's no corrective action taken, what happens is that's a loss to us. That money is being lost to the provider of the, to the insurance for us to insure these people that need especially in Medicaid. So there's a loss of medical dollars that could be out in the field helping patients that is being totally wasted. And let me tell you why. Because if I do it to a private, we have the ability to take on a private contractor for restitution if we find a discrepancy. If we find a discrepancy in the bureaucracy, we have no course of action. It's us. And this is part of the problem.
Right, but what's happened, especially during the Bush administration, because everything is being outsourced and everything is being privatized under the Bush administration, it seems like. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I did see in SICO is that other countries, Canada, France, Britain, have excellent healthcare systems, and they're run by the government. And they're run very efficiently. People get very good health care. And some of the things I think we've heard, in Canada we have long waiting times, which is a myth. And that's that's pointed out in the movie. We talked, Michael Moore talked to some people, Americans living in France. They're extremely happy. So when you talk about privatizing Medicaid, are you talking about privatizing just the administrative piece or the other parts of it too?
Well, most would probably be administrative duties. And by doing that, I feel that we would be able to save money in the long run. But like I said to you, is I would like to see those companies driven in Michigan that have the abilities to bid on those contracts, service those in Michigan. I mean, I want to keep it Michigan-based. And I would, if I had to put an amendment to do so, keep it in America, if not in Michigan, I would do so.
Would you make sure that all of the work was done in Michigan, so that there wasn't a Michigan-based company outsourcing their work to India or China or wherever?
Oh yeah, you bet. Well,
Mexico?
I would rather see it. If it's Indiana and it's a next door neighbor state or something like, whoever could get here to provide that service and bid on the contract. Not that we don't want a single source bid, because we want the best provider for bang for the buck, if you will. And then that way they will bid, just like road projects, they bid what they will do for the project. So I would like to keep it certainly American. I have a problem with part of the new Michigan business tax where they gave credits to GM, Ford, and Chrysler when they are outsourcing those jobs, and I have a problem with that.
Well, we'd like to see all those jobs kept in Michigan for sure.
So would I.
I had Andy Meisner on the show a couple shows ago, and we spoke about a subject that I think is probably pretty near and dear to your heart, since your wife, I understand, had an autologous stem cell transplant. Mm-hmm. And your position, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're opposed to embryonic stem cell research based on just the moral factor involved in that. What I don't get about Republicans and probably your position too is, these, and really their blastocysts are going to be discarded anyway, mm-hmm. as I understand it. Why is it you feel we shouldn't be doing embryonic stem cell research in Michigan? Because I really think, in my opinion anyway, it's keeping Michigan from being competitive, because there's other states, other countries that are doing this research anyway. Why shouldn't it be? We have a marvelous university system here where I'm sure we could be making many more advances than we are. So why do you feel like we should stifle that research?
Well, Bruce, first of all, you said you were going to ask that when I came on the show. But since you did, I will talk to you about that.
I had it written down.
Okay. Yes, my wife had a stem cell transplant. It was basically her decision to use her own stem cells. It's kind of funny, only 4 hospitals in Michigan have stem cell transplant units, and it's based under what's called Certificate of Need. I've been fighting to get more in the state, one of them at Beaumont, per se, because my wife, we were 2 miles from Beaumont. I just feel 850,000 people in Macomb County and 1.25 million in Oakland County shouldn't have to go to Wayne County or U of M to get that kind of service. There's too many people here. When my wife went into metabolic shock, I almost did not make it back to the hospital, and Beaumont could not take her because they didn't have that type of unit. What troubles me even more as I look into it, if you're north of Pontiac, Flint, to the top of the UP, there is no hospitals that provide that. None.
This is the
for
service
for a stem cell unit.
But okay, but I don't want to, and I really didn't mean to talk about your wife. That really wasn't the focus of the question.
That's okay.
I wanted to stay, though, on the idea that Michigan has some of the most restrictive embryonic stem cell laws in the country.
I agree.
And other states, even California, who has a Republican governor, they're kind of leading the way. Governor Schwarzenegger has decided that that's an important area that they need to be looking into. So why are the Republicans, I understand the moral issue, but why do you think, since these blastocysts would be thrown away anyway, there's over 400,000 of them as I understand it, they're going to be thrown away. Why do you think the Republicans in Michigan are being so obstreperous about this issue?
Well, first of all, you've been talking to Andy too much. No. No, Andy's a good friend. And like I said earlier, my wife watches his show. And like in my wife's situation, it was her personal choice. If it failed, would we go somewhere else where they had embryonic? But that was my wife's decision to make. Let me go back here a minute. I want to say about 4 years ago, I believe when Arnold Schwarzenegger became governor of California, they passed a tax of $3 billion to proceed on the biomedical field for that research. I would consider that. And when we have a $2 billion jobs fund that's scattered in all directions from biotech to a high-tech manufacturing now, we'll never catch up. I just don't see financially us keeping up with $3 billion out the gate when we don't have that kind of funding resources. I do think that there is shared information, and our universities, to my knowledge, are sharing that information and are in the research. Now, I don't know about the transportation of embryos and things like that, how that works, so I can't speak to that. But to the best of my knowledge, a lot of that information is being shared.
So you're for Andy's bill? Okay, you're not going to answer that. Okay. Let's see. Let's talk about sicko a little bit and some of the information that came out in the movie. And I'll try to brief you as we go
brief
along
me on it
here,
because
since
I
you
haven't seen it. I'm
yet.
looking forward to seeing it.
Okay. We did talk, and you kind of agreed to go see it, but you haven't. I know you've been busy and you haven't had a chance to go see it.
Just got done with part of the budget last week.
So I know it's a busy time in Lansing. But he talks about some of these issues in the movie that are extremely important. One of the things that I learned in the movie is that 18,000 people a year die prematurely in the United States because they're not insured. America is the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't have universal health care coverage. Is that an acceptable situation to you in the world when we're the wealthiest country in the entire world and we don't have universal health care for our citizens?
Bruce, that's unacceptable. You're absolutely right. In a society that we have, in a global economy, in the society we have, I believe my statistics said that it was 13% of Americans do not have some type of insurance, whether it's Blue Cross. I happen to be a military veteran, a disabled veteran from Vietnam. So I have like a secondary coverage. But a lot of people, whether it's the elderly on Medicare, Medicaid, veterans, in fact, that was one of the first uses of kind of a universal health care. It used to be that they would only take care of service-connected disabled people. Well, then it became where they opened it up to non-service connected. If you served your country, you could go and make a claim and use the military health care system. So we do use a form of that now. In fact, of the two systems of a pure universal health care system, there are two forms, as you know, and the second form is a hybrid, and that's what we have now. But we need to improve on the hybrid so everybody can be insured, as Mitt Romney is trying to do. But their mandate says you have to have health coverage of some means by a certain date. Well, first of all, we don't know who can provide for themselves that health care, and if they're not getting Medicare or Medicaid or some other form, we have to find a way to insure the others. And I think we can do a lot of that, but I think we need to improve our hybrid system.
What do you mean by a hybrid system? Let's go back for a minute.
Well, that's where we have a public and governmental pay. It's a dual payer system. When you're under a pure universal health care, it's only government driven, the payer, and that's part of the problem. If it's driven that way, you will see doctors, and that was one of the problems they did have in Canada, was the loss of doctors, because being paid on a per person basis for a flat rate fee, they felt the doctors could not get ahead.
Well, you need to go see sicko right away. Because one of the groups that they talked to was a group of Americans living in France. Because there are so many countries now with universal coverage where it's working extremely well. And I think what America could do is go visit those countries, talk with their healthcare providers. Because one interview, they were talking about to a doctor in the UK, and he had a very nice house, he had 2 nice cars, and he was not going to, he was making probably the equivalent of $1 million a year in their system. And they do something that's very interesting, I thought, which is they give doctors incentives. They get bonuses if they have more healthy patients. In other words, less diabetes, lower, that their patients
That's very
have
interesting.
their blood pressure's under control, their sugar's under control, their patients'
I
weight.
wish we could do that for teachers.
Oh, I think that made a lot of sense to me, that they get a bonus.
If I did that for teachers, I thought that would be good.
Exactly.
No, I think that's very interesting. However, I think that based upon what a person makes, like the poverty level, they shouldn't pay anything, or it should be like $2 or something. I have a person that has called me because of my bills and said, John, I know this lady is on Medicaid, lives in West Bloomfield or Bloomfield Hills. She's driving a Mercedes. She gave $1 million plus house to her son and claims she has no income. Well, you know, I believe there should be a litmus test. When you have that kind of assets, you shouldn't be on Medicaid. It's for the most needy.
We're not talking about Medicaid. We're talking. What I'm talking
Yeah.
about, and what the movie talks to, is universal single-payer health care. And one thing, you know, one travesty I see is what happened, you know, in the last few years with the Bush administration with this drug bill. You know, I was watching, I think it was 60 Minutes on Sunday, and they were talking about how the drug industry lobbied. They were spending tens of millions of dollars lobbying Congress, the U.S. Congress,
Sure.
To get that bill. And the reason was because that's a high-profit thing. The Veterans Administration, they showed a list of about the 20 top drugs, and one of them was one of the cholesterol drugs, and they were paying, I think, $1,400 a year in the the seniors, the Medicare for seniors, and they were paying $100 and some in the veterans system.
Yes.
So why should that be? Why should we allow these lobbyists to come in, lobby the legislators, and get that kind of plum? I mean, the healthcare industry, the drug industry, literally wrote that bill for the drug industry.
Well, I hear it happens the same thing for optometrists. My wife collected 600 glasses, and we thought we were doing it for needy people who needed glasses, and find out that there was a federal bill that they had put in for optometrists that said if you give glasses to, you can't give them here in our own country. We have to give them to third world countries. And I have no idea why that is. So, I mean, I agree. I think we should look into that. I've had people leave here and go to Mexico, and they were sitting in some border town and was in a drugstore because they needed something, and said, well, hey, by the way, I have this prescription. Will you accept it? And they did. And they were paying like $30 a pill here for heart medication. They were getting it there for $17. Now, if you can tell me why that is in a third world country, I mean, I wish I knew that. If I had the answers to that, I'd...
Well, another interesting fact I saw too was we talked about the lobbyists, because I really think that we need to take the money out of out of the government. We need to have. Another subject for another day, but campaign finance reform is a big thing of mine. But on that topic,
okay, well,
real
I'm
quick,
with you on that.
Another real quick, $100 million when the Clintons were in office. $100 million was spent by lobbyists to defeat Hillary Clinton's health care initiative. Do you think that lobbyists work in the best interests of the American people or for the profits of the companies they represent? And do you feel that's the way our government should work? I probably already answered that one, but let's go real quick. We're kind of running out of time
let me tell you. When I talk to lobbyists, and they can tell you in Lansing, I use them to learn the pros and cons of an issue because I can't do all the research that they have available to them, but I don't hit them up. If they decide to come to an event, that's fine. But I use them for knowledge. I don't use them, or they can't walk up to me and say, hey, Johnny, there's an issue coming up. Are you having a campaign, a fundraiser? Because I don't work like that. I use them as a knowledge base. And I get the pros and cons, and I try to make the best decision when I pull that lever or push that button for the public. But then I'm prepared when I do that to go back to my district and explain why I pushed that button.
Okay, well, so you would be in favor of publicly financed campaigns. I know, I was working on a campaign in 04, actually in 06, and we were, it's a big thing. You got to be on the phone all the time. So I would be, strongly in favor of getting some public financing.
Well, if I could say that it's the most disdainful thing I do is raise money to run for office. And I think a lot of people feel that way. It's kind of an embarrassing situation.
And you're begging for money constantly.
Right, and I'm lucky I grew up in the city where I've grown up with a lot of friends that have decided to support me.
Another interesting fact, real quick, we just got a couple minutes this evening. According to the World Health Organization, this was in Michael Moore's movie too, the United States of America ranks 37 out of 191 countries in terms of quality of care. And the countries that obviously ahead of us are like countries like Cuba. That's where Michael Moore has gotten quite a bit of trouble for taking some 9/11 workers to Cuba to get care. So,
I hear they're outsourcing doctors real well.
It's working out pretty well. So that's why I'm hoping you get the chance to see the movie.
Yeah.
So would you be in favor at some point of Michigan? I know Governor Granholm has a plan. I think it's called My Care. Is that a plan that's come up for discussion yet in the legislature, or you've been strictly dealing with the budget so far since we've been having so many?
Well, you know, I don't know. I just don't know where that sits with the governor and how far it's gone through the administration to the Senate or to the House. I haven't heard of that coming back up. I mean, we have Maya Child, we have a bunch of other. I really don't know where it sits, where the governor sits on that, because she's been tuned into the budget as well.
Right.
But as we were talking about universal health care, like I said, you have the hybrid system, which we are part of, and I think we can improve a whole lot on that. I'm worried about total universal health care, however. So.
Okay, well, I think we've had a pretty wide-ranging discussion this afternoon, and I appreciate your coming in.
Well, Bruce, thank you for inviting me. I'd love to come back and visit with you again.
Well, we'll come back. I'm sure there'll be some more issues, and this is Bruce Fealk for Michigan Progress. Please visit our blog, www.michiganprogress.blogspot.com. Thank you very much.
Wind too. Michigan's got all the water around it. We have
Wind,